welcome your host, Mr. Sydney Brownwood.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to this TooFatLardies Oddcast. This evening, I'm joined again by the George and Zippy of Wargaming, Nick Skinner and Richard Clark. Chaps, welcome once again to the Oddcast. It's great to see you back with us in the studio.
Well, thank you, Sid. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Hello, Zippy.
I knew that, Jeffrey. Sydney.
To anyone under 40, this won't make any sense. Just roll with us, please.
Up above the streets and houses.
Rainbow climbing high. Very good. George and Zippy. Well, thank you for that, Sid.
It's a great pleasure.
Two of my favourite characters, actually.
Who would you say you preferred? Would you like the
mild-mannered George?
Or do you like the rather more fresh Zippy?
I think I'd rather go for a bear with Zippy.
Zippy, oh.
Oh, good that nobody chose Bungle.
Never trusted Bungle.
Let's move swiftly on, because we are surrounded by figures and paints in here, spilling over from the workshop. It's been a while since we sat down together, so I thought I'd better ask, what on earth are you doing, Richard, to generate such a mess?
Infamy, Sydney. I'm on a mega build. So, maybe we could talk about some of the megas I'm building when we head across to the workshop. But yeah, Infamy is at that playtest stage where I'm having to build a load of stuff, paint new stuff, create lots of exciting things. So hence the mess. Apologies.
So Infamy, just for anyone who's been living in a cave for the last few months, what is Infamy?
Infamy, Sydney, is a set of rules in development for ancient wargame. Specifically, in the initial rules, we're looking at Romans versus barbarians. So we're looking at Britons, we're looking at Gauls, we're looking at Germans, we're looking at Celtic, Iberians, northern Spain, with a view to expanding that into other supplements which cover Carthage, which cover the Greeks, and then which go east into the eastern edges of the Roman Empire to cover all the characters who one meets in those areas. Full-on play test at this point in time. Nick's fondling some stuff, some Federati. They're Foundry Germans with Foundry Roman Auxilia, where I cut the heads off, and they are warlord metal German heads.
Well, Nick's fingers are all over those Germans. We'll come to those in a minute. But from what I've seen online, and we've obviously talked about it before, we interviewed you for Lard Island News, the rules seem to be going well, and we've been playing it at the club.
Yeah, really well.
You're pleased with where things are so far?
Yeah, immensely pleased. Actually, it's one of those things where you think, I'm sure this will work, and you don't know until you get it on the table. And then when we did, it did.
That's good to hear.
Obviously, we're really only talking about the big principles there, and that's the bit you really want to work. You get these core design ideas that you want to work. And the thing I was really looking at here was getting that asymmetrical aspect to it, the way that the two, the civilized and the barbarians, fight in very different manners, and that's gone really, really well. Been really pleased with that.
That's excellent. And is this something? This isn't something that you're going to be taking to Crisis, is it, this week?
No. We're taking an Arnhem-based game to Crisis. Nick's Recce Jeeps on the Utrechtsweg. I'm going to be standing at the edge of the table and blowing them up as he gets them out the box. But yeah, we're going to see how they get on there. Lots of exciting stuff happening at Crisis. I'm really looking forward to it. Meeting some guys from Lard America who are coming over, so that's going to be fantastic. Trip of a lifetime.
Yeah, lots of uncertainty around it, of course, because nobody quite knew what was going to be going on with Brexit.
The B word.
Yeah, but obviously, hopefully the fact that that's going backwards in time means that Crisis will at least go ahead and hopefully will be another really good event in the calendar. We're taking the game that we took to Hereward, the game that I took there that we played on the Utrecht with the Jeeps. And it should be a lot of fun. Lot of fun.
A lot of fun.
That looked to be a great game at Harrowwood. We can talk about that a little bit later on, and talk about Crisis, I think, later on.
Well, it'll be even better in Holland, because everything's even better in Holland. So.
But we're going to Belgium.
Apart from the fact
Even Belgium will be better in Holland.
Oh, Zeppe, I forgot that bit. I've been going to Holland in my mind for many weeks now, and I have actually just booked some dates up to go back there, which is why I'm...
Holland.
My mind is in Holland mode at the moment.
And this is because you're still working on the Arnhem 1944 campaign handbook for Chain of Command.
Yes,
Right.
I breathed out quite a heavy sigh there, because we're in the last stages of it. But it's always those last stages that take the extra time, because they've got to be right.
And to be fair, I've not really helped, because I've tapped into this well of enthusiasm for Infamy, and Nick said to me, "Oh, can you get these maps done, and can we look at this layout stuff?" And I've gone, "No," because I'm doing this at the moment. But I've really been working hard to get the playtest version of Infamy ready. So it's my fault really that Arnhem has been pushed back slightly, but
we need to get it over that final line now. It's
Yeah,
not far to go.
No,
So.
that's right. At least, but the point is, we're going to have the initial pint-sized campaign options out for that, so people will be able to start that at various points, whether they're starting it up at the top end at Wolfhazer, or whether they're starting at the bottom near Valkenswaard. They're going to be able to get started on the campaign. So
It's going to be quite an achievement getting it done. I mean, I know it's something you've worked tremendously hard at. I do just wonder what you're going to be doing, Nick, once you finish the Arnhem campaign. I mean,
I know where I
will
want
be
to
empty.
focus. No, it isn't. I know where I want to focus. I want to stick in Northwest Europe and follow the British Army through across into their final campaign of 1945 and go late war. My own personal interest is that direction.
That's a teaser for the future. And
the teaser from the geezer. We could have that as a best bit on the bench.
Yeah,
A teaser
it'd be
from the
great. What
geezer.
a great segment in a podcast.
well, I had thought you were going further east and talking more far east.
Well, that's me.
Well,
That's
you.
me. That's me. And once again,
I knew one of you were doing it.
yeah,
Sure
once
is.
again, that's really coming together. Actually, that's really coming together in terms of the list. It's just a case of doing the layout now and finalising that, because there's been a lot of hard work going on behind the scenes, particularly with Len down.
And this is
down
again
in
Chain of
Australia.
Command.
Yeah,
These
it's
are
a Chain of Command Far East handbook to match with the 1940 handbook that we did. So it's one of the series of handbooks that we're doing. But I have to admit, one of the things that you think, we'll do the Far East in the same way as you think you will do the Mediterranean theatre. But the Far East, of course, lasts for 4 years and covers a huge extent.
It's not a small
geographically.
campaign, is it?
It's not a small
Geographically all in
campaign.
time.
It really is. It really is. It's bigger than the campaign in Europe from D-Day to the fall of Berlin. It's bigger geographically, bigger in terms of the forces involved, bigger in terms of everything. So it's been a mega project. So, that's carrying on forward, inching towards the try line.
But Sid, even before we get there though, we'll have Lard magazine, of course, which will be out before Christmas. So that will be full of all kind of lard related goodness.
And we're looking for contributions to Lard magazine if anybody's interested in submitting articles, other
scenarios,
articles,
ideas, terrain ideas,
Yeah.
anything that you think will be of interest to the lard community. You need to write it quite quickly because I want to get it put to bed. Really before the end of November.
Yeah.
So is there a deadline for contributions?
Yeah, tomorrow will be.
Within the next couple of weeks. Will be,
anything you can produce within 10 to 15 days is going to be great. And you can mail that through to sales at TooFatLardies.
But,
I guess.
Yeah, you
Don't
could
go
do.
through there, is that
you
easiest?
could do. Sales at TooFatLardies.co.uk.
.co.uk.
That's it.
That's fantastic. Well, I'm sure that people will be sending their submissions quickly. Certainly hope so. And I can see you've both been busy, and maybe other people have been busy as well. And I know that everyone will be looking forward to seeing the fruits of both of your labours. Now, we've already touched upon painting and modelling, but maybe now is a good time, gentlemen, to take a wander over to the workshop. And while we do so, let's listen to a word from our sponsors.
From the makers of Chain of Command comes a tale of drama.
Mon capitaine, les Anglais are on the bridge.
Ah, so it seems we shall meet again, Captain Fondleo.
A tale of action.
That's it, lads. Give them another volley. They're falling back. Remember, 3 rounds a minute.
A tale of romance.
But Mr. Fondleo, you are so prominent.
For large skirmishes in the era of black powder, where the story ends, sharp practice begins.
Oh, my word. Oh, can hardly get through the door. God, just push that door a bit more, guys.
Ow, ow.
Oh, Richard, what on earth have you been doing in here? I can hardly get into the workshop. Come on, Nick. And it looks like an even bigger bomb than usual has hit it. I can't even begin to explain the mess. What is going on?
That's Nick's lunch.
Is that what it was digging in my leg? I was wondering.
Well, I know it's called the entire ancient world in the workshop, and literally, I mean world. I mean we've got hills, we've got buildings. They're still wet, but
Don't touch those.
They are still wet.
They are still wet.
Good.
I made that mistake.
Yeah, they are
earlier.
looking good. Yeah, that's some of the hills that
Are
I'm doing.
alive.
They are, well, they're not necessarily alive, but they're a bit damp. So we've got hills, and I'm building some Roman limes, or limes, or however you want to pronounce it. Walls and ditches and watchtowers, because the whole concept of Infamy is that this is not big battle ancient wargaming. This is small actions on the border. So this is 7th Cavalry against pesky Indians, or however you want to call it.
DMZ.
This is the DMZ in Vietnam. And the concept of borders for the Romans was not the same concept that we have today. The idea that you could have a line delineating where one person's territory began and another one's ended, only really worked when you had rivers. Or a real physical boundary. The rest of the time, the areas that were there geographically were almost like that DMZ of an area of influence. So the type of games that we're looking at here are dealing with raiders who are straying into Roman territory, going out on punitive raids, accompanying the paid chest for the legion that's on its way up to Eberacum or wherever it is. And so what I'm trying to do is to, well, as well as painting all the armies, is create a brave new Roman world. So lots of buildings being done, lots of woods. I'm doing some standing stones. I'm building some Celtic roundhouses. And it all takes up space, which is why everything's littered everywhere. I've got my new German cavalry coming on. I've got my Roman cavalry over there waiting to be based. I've got the Germanic Federati fighting for the Germans. They've just been dipped. Those are the German cavalry from Foundry.
Yeah,
Beautiful figures. Beautiful. And what I like about we talked about the Foundry Germans before in terms of best bit on the bench, but what I like about those figures is you can super glue those spears, which are steel, into place, and then you use a pair of tweezers to clamp the hands together. Yeah. So they ain't going anywhere. Well, they, within reason. Don't pull it off.
I'm just seeing how sharp the spear is.
Oh, they're surgically sharp.
They're pretty sharp,
surgically
aren't they?
sharp. Yeah. So it's been a real joy dealing with the Foundry Germans. In fact, I've come to the conclusion that I'm having to repaint all of my Germans because I went with plastic Germans, but they weren't plastic Germans. I was robbed. They were plastic Celts with different heads, and they don't look Germanic. They do look Celtic, but they don't look Germanic. The Germans.
So what's different then between a German head and a Celtic head?
Well, hairstyles, mate. Swabian knots
different
and
barbers.
things like that. Different barbers, yeah. There's different levels of civilization. You can look at the Gaulish lands, and they had towns and a level of cultural development which really you didn't have in Germany. The Germans, once you get to the Rhine anyway, once you go into Germania Magna, you are looking at people who are living in far-flung societies where a family would live in a small farm a long way from any other small farm, and they'd all have an allegiance, a lot more feudal. Whereas the Gauls were not far away, to be honest, apart from the fact they hadn't developed the written word, which is why they get a bad press. They weren't that far away culturally from the Romans, if we're looking at 100 years BC in terms of where they'd come to. You know, they were developing towns and so on and so forth.
Was that BC or BC?
BC, that's BC.
Not BCE?
No, BCE doesn't exist. It's bullshit.
And how have you found...
I know how to press all the buttons.
You're pressing buttons like crazy. How have you found designing a set of rules and working in a war games terrain environment, which you've visited before for Dux Britanniarum, but you're taking back earlier?
It's quite different, actually, because, well, apart from the fact hills are hills and woods are woods, it is quite different, actually, because Dux was a world where you had the splendours of Rome that had fallen into disarray. So the type of buildings you were doing there were almost Roman in their looks, but they would have a thatched roof, or the roof would have fallen in, or whatever. Or you'd have an old decaying Roman villa. This, we're going back prior to that, so we really are. And because we're on the frontiers, I am going to be doing some Roman farms and Roman villas to represent Germania Inferior, where the Romans are, so that the hairy barbarian Germans can raid across into that. And the area that I'm really looking to do is along the River Main. The city of Mainz was a big Roman city, and it's an area I've been to a lot and looked at the fabulous museums that they've got there. They've got some great collection of Roman artefacts there. And so I'm setting my campaign around that area. And of course, once you get over into the Roman territory, you're really talking about very, very early villages, rather than anything that's Roman that's fallen apart. Yeah. So it's been quite different, and although I have used a stand-in some of the Dux towers that there's one over there that you can see, which I used for one game that we did, which is based on the Limes towers, where they'd have a section of Roman infantry in one of those. But actually I've got a really nice proper one of those that I picked up. Let me just see if I can grab it. That I picked up at Hereward a couple of years ago. The game was right next to this guy. Hold on, stay there.
So it's now time for our intermission. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard disappears from the workshop.
Never to be seen again.
Right, here we are.
And he's back.
And I'm back in the room. I picked this up, 28 Roman Watchtower, 28mm Roman Watchtower,
Okay.
from a company called Original Laser Design. Don't know. Maybe the name of the company. I'm not.
Looks typically as what one would expect a Roman watchtower to look like.
It is absolutely typical for the limes, however you want to pronounce it. I prefer limes, but I know a lot of people say limes because it's spelt limes. This would be just set back from the wall, and they would have these within visibility distance of the next one. So that they could signal, and then each area would have a larger Roman fort. So if these guys put up a signal, they'd draw in their ladder, and the hairy barbarians would swirl around them, throwing pumpkins at them and whatever is appropriate. And then the legion would rock up, or other auxiliary troops would rock up from the local fort and biff them, basically. Anyway, so I'm building a lot of that. I'm also building, as I say, Celtic roundhouses. So that's kept me busy, and loads of figures. Loads of figures, things like mule trains, all sorts of bits and pieces, really. I know, I can feel that my painting energy is starting to sap, because I'm one of these people who hurls himself entirely into the maelstrom of painting huge numbers of figures.
But that's okay with Infamy, because you don't need 500 figures aside, that's right.
No, but I'm painting about 7 different armies at the same time.
Okay. So that is the other way that you can actually paint 500 figures for a series of games. But for mere mortals, that's not necessary.
No, it's not necessary. No, very much so. I mean, 50 figures and you're in. It's about sharp practice size. But for me, I'm literally, because I want the Britons to be different to the Gauls, to be different to the Germans, and I want the Germans on the Rhine to be different to the Germans in the forested interiors further over near the Weser.
As would have been the case, they
big time.
different tribal religions
And different cultural influences.
identities. Yeah.
You're going to get a lot of tribes along the Rhine who are working with the Romans and even providing auxiliary troops who are learning, different skills from their Roman masters. And if you look at Arminicus, who rebelled and killed the legions in the Teutoburger Val, he had been a Roman officer leading irregular horse from his Germanic tribe. And his brother didn't rebel. His brother remained serving the Romans during that campaign. God knows what happened to him. He disappears from history, so he probably had his head stuck on a pole somewhere, but there we are. So yeah, I'm really busy, but no, not normal human beings would be much better off picking one army and sticking to that. But I need to do the play testing, so it's a case of trying to get it right. But I'm nearly there.
It's looking really impressive. I mean, it's.
I'm really enjoying it, actually. I mean, just getting onto interesting units like those Federati who've gone back to their tribe, and I did a bit of sculpting. That Roman, that is a Roman officer, but I've sculpted on some trousers underneath his underneath his Roman uniform, just to make him look a bit more of a barbarian. Sculpted on a moustache and beard to make him look, and painted him up with his blonde hair to make him look obviously different.
I think part of the fun of any period is once you always need to start with really the basics.
You do,
You're
and
well advised to start with the basics. And I know you started with Romans in
Larica
Segmentum, and you started with some generic barbarians. But once you get a feel for a period, then as you've done here with the Federati, you can really start developing a particular look and do some conversions, and you really start to have a feel for the scenario.
I think you start to zoom in on whatever captures your own interest, don't you?
Yeah, you do.
I mean, the units really kind of shine sometimes.
Yeah, that's just a bit of fun. I mean,
there's about
16 figures in the leader, so that
that's nice.
Actually, unusually for the Germans, they're in 8-figure units because they're
work,
adopting.
Really, for most
yeah, it is. That's right. That's a little German. I want to repaint the standard. I'm not very happy with
it's
the
interesting
standard.
In terms of their hair and beard, a lot of them look like sort of 1970s.
Roy Wood from Wizard, really.
BBC engineers from the 1970s.
I was actually going to say Nordic black metal bands.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's probably the same as
Yeah.
the BBC
all sort of,
1970s production staff.
DLT.
The hairy monster, the hairy cornflake.
Well,
so loads of flavour, loads of characters.
Yeah,
loads of fun.
Beautiful
Loads of
unit
70s
DJs.
Not half.
And Nick, you've been busy in the workshop as well.
No, I haven't.
I made all this mess myself.
I haven't been doing that much really because he's been doing it all.
Yeah.
I've just been watching him go bananas.
You've just been spectating and applauding.
Yeah. Well, I've been diverted onto other things of late. So
Hurling abuse.
Yeah, I've not had that much go through my own personal workshop, but we've been, interested in other areas of Sydney that we're going to talk about
which we'll
shortly.
move on to later. That's good. So, is that everything you've been doing?
Oh, how much more do you want, mate?
How much more is there?
I've painted so much stuff and built so much stuff. I honestly can't remember what I've done. I really can't remember what I've done.
Well, with all of that material, I mean, you must have come across something which is a candidate for the best bit on the bench.
Well, I've actually got a couple of things that I was casting my eye around the workshop earlier. And I had a trip up to Nottingham in the week, mate. That's where the sheriff of Nottingham comes from. And I paid a little visit to one of the stars of the hobby, which was Annie at Bad Squiddo Games, who, apart from being completely mad, has started doing a new range of resin scenics.
They're lovely, aren't they?
Under the name Bad Squiddo Scenics. And here's some of them. For a start,
Fireplaces.
These are kind of, these are all sorts of bits and pieces, these are largely sort of set fireplaces, piles of woods and logs and things like that. The type of thing that would grace any barbarian's doorstep. I mean, they are really nice sculpts.
So these are basically large campfires with a selection of different sort of bits of chopped wood or tree trunks.
Well, some are large, some are small. I mean, the smaller one's about 1 inch across, the biggest one's about 2 inches across.
Beautifully cast.
They are, and lovely resin. It's that creamy resin that you know isn't going to break. Look, here we are. I'm going to throw this one in the air, and it didn't break. I'm glad it didn't. Actually, I haven't tested that before. But these are some barricades.
Yeah, lovely, very nice.
Perfect for my ancient Germans to shelter behind. And really lovely. Just nice pieces. And a couple of packs of them gives me all I'm going to need. All I'm going to need. So some of the stuff that she does is fabulous for just making your bases that your buildings are on more attractive. And some of the other stuff is absolutely perfect for little support options within the rules.
She's got some really good other stuff in her ranges as well. I mean,
animals. She's got some great animals.
I used a lot of her civilians for the. I did some liberated civilians for Holland, and
very nice.
I had to convert some. But she got some really lovely figures. That
she did actually tell me how insane she thought you were, which I thought was good coming from her. But
some very nice goods, marketplace goods I brought from
all
her.
That.
And there's some great things that she's doing with World War II sort of Beauforts.
Lovely new Beauforts. And that is made in the same creamy resin. A lot of the Beauforts that I've seen in 28mm are cast in metal. And because the Beauforts has got quite a long, thin barrel, they all go bent and look bloody awful and get damaged. But this resin has got a lovely little bit of give to it. It's nothing like the wonky sword resin that we talked about the other week.
The SPQR.
That's right. This is a really nice resin that if you drop it, I literally threw that up in the air and it hit the floor from 8 foot up, and no damage at all. And if that were painted, that wouldn't have damaged because there's enough give in there to make an allowance.
That's always one of the concerns with resin, that it is quite brittle.
Certainly resin used to be. Now that ain't the best bit on the bench, but that really does get an honourable mention.
What can be better than that?
Well, there's one thing that could be better than that, and if this one thing hadn't been shoved through my letterbox at 4 o'clock in the morning,
Sorry about that.
I'm just glad you wrapped it up. But then Annie's bits would have been the best bit on the bench. However, I'm sorry, Annie, you were beaten to it by my old mate Pat Smith. Silver Whistly-o. Setting the Scene, Volume 2, creating a War Games layout for the Mediterranean. Now, Pat Smith, a lot of people will know, is a chap who makes fabulous terrain. I did a piece in one of the specials, I think it was a Christmas special about 4 or 5 years ago, where he'd done a great big Reichsbahn layout, which we used for the Eastern Front as the Soviet armoured and infantry forces rushed into Nazi Germany on this beautiful table with all these railway engines. It was fabulous. And everybody that I know has admired Pat's work. Well, about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, he did a book called Setting the Scene, which was about making winter terrain for things like the Battle of the Bulge, especially. And it was a lovely book, but the only thing that made it slightly not relevant for me was I was never going to build a load of winter terrain because I kind of want my terrain to be a bit more multi-purpose. Now, this book covers the Mediterranean. Now, let's think about that. I'm currently dealing with Infamy. What could be better than some Mediterranean Romanesque buildings? Sharp practice in Spain, in the peninsula, in Italy, absolutely perfect for that. And chain of command in Italy or anywhere around the Mediterranean. The book is fabulous because it shows you how to build all these superb pieces of terrain. But more importantly, the way it's presented and the way it's laid out, Pat explains really clearly what ingredients you need for every project, where he gets them from, and then shows step by step with detailed photographs for every step exactly how he does it. As an instruction book This is nothing like the one you get from IKEA where you open it all up and then can't work out what the hell's going on. This is almost impossible, I would suggest, to get wrong, because the level of detail, and Sid's flicking through it and nodding his head as we speak, as though he understands anything.
It's the air as the pages go past.
It is,
Fanny's
that's
face,
right.
he
That's
kind
right.
of wakes up.
But it's fabulous, isn't it, Sid? You can see.
I think it's a really fantastic book. I mean, I did have the chance about half an hour before we started this to go through it.
Yeah.
I mean, Pat is a real gentleman, and Pat's blog is a model of clarity, but the book is really very good and exceptionally good, I think, for a personally, privately produced book.
Yeah.
Because as Richard says, as you're saying, there's photographs for every single chapter. There's about a dozen chapters. Photographs of each stage. All the photos are clear. They're all labelled. The writing's really clear. It's set out. There's not too much. There's not too little.
He decided to publish it himself because I think that allowed him to have exactly what he wanted. Because the thing is, if you come to me and say, "Will you publish a book?" I'm probably going to say, "I don't want it to be 148 pages, Pat. I want it to be 100." But no, he's allowed to do it. It's 148 pages, and it's absolutely fabulous. Absolutely
And a
fabulous.
little at the mention at the end. It's the whole of the Mediterranean scene, including figure painting, and there's a guest section by another well-known blogger, Nick. Some beautiful illustrations and some painting of Italian vehicles and ships.
Lovely.
Yeah.
So
I believe we're going to be meeting Nick in
very much hope so.
Crisis.
In Crisis.
Yeah.
So it's a whole package, really, and I think it's no higher praise than to say that this looks very professional.
It does,
Somebody
and-
who's just done it off his own back.
I think even more than that, actually, just
Really
looking
does.
through it, as you flick through it, a lot of the things that are in there are very generic in terms of the skills that you can pick
Yeah,
up from doing
yeah.
that. So even if you're not doing Mediterranean, if you're doing Normandy or Eastern Front for World War II, actually a lot of the techniques that are in there are going to map across really neatly.
Well, funnily enough, I looked at this thing where Pat is building some rocky hillsides for the Mediterranean. Well, I've been building some rocky hillsides for Infamy for Germany, and I had a read through this and used some of the techniques. Not quite the same, but I adapted the material that I had to do this. So, but yeah, this is absolutely fabulous, and without a shadow of a doubt, the best bit on the bench. When I got it, I was so impressed. I emailed Pat and said, "This is the best terrain book I've ever seen." And I backed a Kickstarter last year for a terrain book, and if it's anything like that quality, I would be very impressed, but also amazed, because that is a superb piece of kit. I cannot recommend it enough.
So that's Setting the Scene, Volume 2, Creating a War Games Layout for the Mediterranean by Pat Smith. And I think that's available to order from a link on Pat's blog.
Do you remember how much it cost you, Richard?
Do you know what, mate? I don't. And the reason I don't is that Pat and his colleague, Steve, who we worked with to publish this, very kindly sent me this copy. And it, as I say, it dropped in through my letterbox. And Pat did put a note in there saying, in the introduction, saying about how
You should
one
send
of the
him
things
25 quid to keep it.
I should do, yeah. Well, how one of the things that motivated him to do this is the fact that he really enjoys playing Sharp Practice and Chain of Command on his terrain, and I think this was a bit of a thank you present. And so, I mean, I was over the moon to receive this, and as I say, I dropped Pat an email straight away and said to him that how impressed I was with this book. So there we go, best bit on the bench without a shadow of a doubt.
Okay, so that's the best bit on the bench. Now we've got lots to discuss on the sofa of sincerity, so I suggest we should head back to the studio and crack on with that. This is better. And the workshop, and finally back to the sofa, where we have a big issue with a difference.
A cushion.
And not just a cushion. As you know, I do keep diaries of what I've been up to with my hobby, and casting my eye over those, I've been struck by how we're increasingly using technology, which is perhaps designed for business and industry primarily, as part of our hobby. And I was looking through Twitter the other day, and I noted with interest the game you were playing, both of you, on a German U-boat at the Second World War, and you were using an app in play with the game. So I thought it'd be interesting today to look at how technology has changed the hobby, and how we can see it changing further as you go forwards. And I'm just going to kick off with you, Nick, just to start with, and then you as well, Richard, to sort of give me your views on that.
Well, to touch on that game you mentioned, this was a game called U-Boat that Richard and I played down in Croydon with Sean Randall and Fraser, and which was our first go at playing one of these games which has got an app that goes with it. So you make your decisions, you input your decisions into the app, and the app then tells you what happens and sort of interacts with you. And we had a really interesting 3 or 4 hours sitting in a gaming cafe in Croydon, coming to terms with how that works. Yeah. It was good fun, wasn't it?
Yes, it was good fun. I've never played a collaborative game before, so that was interesting.
Yeah.
But also, it was really interesting to see how the app worked. You know, if you wanted to use the periscope, and rotate the periscope, you rotate in your chair with the iPad. And that would show you the view of the horizon.
So it looked like Richard was filming everybody in the cafe, but actually he was just
I was
looking through the periscope,
looking at Queen Mary's bottom.
So the app,
to quote a very old joke.
So the app was closely integrated with the rules. It wasn't just because
the game was entirely dependent on the app.
You needed it to play the game for sure. Yeah, and I've got the app on my phone. And you can download the app on your phone. Anyone can download the app on their phone, but of course you can't use it properly if you don't have the game to go with it.
So I remember in the 80s there was a set of Napoleonic rules that we used to play at my first club, and that was a set of rules, and it also came with a computer program.
Yeah.
And you loaded up the computer program, and you looked at the rules, and then you tapped in the stuff on the computer program.
Unit number 17, firing on unit number...
Nothing happened for a bit until all the data had been put in.
217 casualties.
That was exactly the information which came out.
Yeah.
And then you started again. So it wasn't any relationship between the rules and the computer, apart from in a big calculator. But what you're describing is an app which is so integral to the game that you can't really play the game without it.
You can't play the game without it at all.
Yeah, and I think that there are lots of other games that have this same aspect to them now as well. I know the guys at Meeples and Miniatures, the games that they're playing, these kind of hybrid games between board game and app-based game seem to be becoming more and more prevalent. So, whether it will ever go that way for our historical games, well... Who knows? Remember, we thought about when we did Chain of Command, we did an iPad version of Chain of Command.
We did.
And we did wonder whether or not you could do something more interactive even through that format.
Yeah, we did, We looked at having those... if you want to know more about movement, press this link here and go to a YouTube video showing you how movement is undertaken in Chain of Command.
So that's interactive as regards the iPad version of the rules, which then links into...
Yeah, that's right. They would actually link into, numerous videos.
Yeah. Because we've actually come quite a long way. I'm thinking back to when you guys first started with TooFatLardies, 2002, 2003.
True, yeah. Well, we can't remember, to be honest with you. We started off the Who group, opened it up to the public in 2002. So I think we must have been developing stuff since 2001, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm pretty certain. I seem to remember the relative age of kids, etc. I seem to remember having a very young babe in arms when I was upstairs tapping away on versions of Charlie Don't Surf or early versions of I Ain't Being Shot Mum, where you're trying to produce something on a word processor. Not desktop publishing, it's just something you can tap in and print on your Daisy Wheel printer or whatever it was you were using.
It was Daisy Wheel, yeah. I had a word processor which was basically a typewriter which allowed you to type one line and see what you'd written, and then you press the button and it would print that one line, and then you could type the next line, and that meant you didn't get any typing errors.
Yeah. I remember that.
But that was, and if you wanted to change the font, you had to go into a stationer's and buy a different Daisy Wheel.
Yeah.
And that would allow you to do it. It's just, looking back, at the time, that was remarkable. Because I remember when I wrote my original articles for Duncan McFarlane at War Games Illustrated, typing it on a typewriter at work, double spacing each line, and then you'd make a bloody typing error and you'd have to get the Tipex out.
Yeah.
It was a nightmare. So having this word processor that allowed you to type one line. What happened was work were getting rid of this. It had gone wrong, and I said, "Well, can I have it?" And I took it and I got it mended for nominal amount. And then I had this machine, and it was just like fabulous because I'll never make a typing error ever again. Because you type 8 words and then check every one of them, and so to go from that to now, we're at the stage where we, initially we published rules, we produced rules in Word document. And now, of course, we've got the full Adobe suite. We've got everything Adobe produced. So we produce these things in InDesign with graphics produced in Photoshop and all these other different packages. So the technology has been huge for us as a publishing business. But in terms of that, doesn't really impact people playing the games. The thing that I do recall with those rules where you typed in unit 17 is firing at unit 248, it's that they go, right, that's now resolved, and you'd go, but I haven't rolled any dice. And it felt like, without rolling the dice, it felt like the fun had been surgically removed from the game.
And an element of fun was removed by that because they were so slow.
Oh, they were horrifically
and
slow.
They were terribly slow.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I think in that process of technology that people have also done is they've manufactured their own cards. They've done their own scenarios. They've laminated. I mean, I know I certainly did all of that with Mud and the Blood and also Dux Britannia. I mean, that's a big thing, and people can do that now. And it's amazing how professional you can make it look with a little bit of effort. I mean, even if you don't have the full Adobe suite. So that's moved on as well, and games can look very professional. I remember that the game I did with Peach's Backhouse last year, I did all the cards and I sort of photoshopped all the cards and the design. And even over a day, you can actually get something looking very good.
Well, a lot of that stuff is great, isn't it? For making games look more professional. So supporting games with handouts and, as you say, laminates and presentations that, we used to do presentations go alongside the games. But, within the game itself, you've got things like the growth of MDF, which is the application of technology to create products that wargamers can use, and that's been a huge development in technology and the way that that's used in gaming. In
laser cutting,
laser cutting, tokens as well that come through laser cutting. All these range, whatever you call them, protractors that overlay what angles of fire you've got, etc. The ability to have those produced by laser cutting devices is has helped the hobby no end.
Look at the sharp practice tokens, chain of command tokens. Yeah. These are all produced for us by companies that cut laser using materials that didn't exist. These acrylic things that didn't exist 25
Well, you would just
years
cut
ago.
them out of cardboard, wouldn't you?
Yeah, they were, and they look pretty shoddy, and especially once they got a bit dog-eared. But now, of course, everything's neat and crisp and tidy and lovely detail.
And some of these changes have crept up on us, and some are much more visible, like the AMP game is very different. I haven't done that before, but the MDF's kind of crept up on us, last 5 6 years.
It has, because it's not very exciting, really, is it? Whereas the app is, wow, bloody hell, I've got a submarine and I'm driving it. That is exciting.
I mean, one of the things that I think a lot of people are interested in and very excited by, especially when you have your fingers on the first prototype, is things like 3D printing.
Yeah, now that is, to me, up there. That's not there with MDF, MDF's great, but it's not revolutionary. 3D printing is revolutionary and has potential going forward to be even more revolutionary. And that's something, but it is, the issue that I've had with it is that I haven't got a clue what on earth, who does it, where do they do it, how do they do it. It's all a bit a dark art that is happening somewhere else.
It would be absolutely fantastic if we had somebody who was able to explain a little bit more about that.
Well, Sydney, today,
Matthew,
is your lucky day. Because I, like you, have been intrigued about 3D printing. And its ability to produce products that we can't get anywhere else, things that we really want and love to get on our table, but we can't get them from a commercial supplier. So I went on a little journey of my own to find out a little bit more. Well, now, here we are. I've come down to the laboratory deep into the heart of Lard Island to our very own Q branch, where we have all kinds of interesting new technologies being demonstrated. And I found one of our top boffins. He's here in his white coat and safety glasses. His name is Wayne Peters. Hello to you, Wayne. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Pay attention, 007.
So you are our 3D printing expert. You answered a call to arms for somebody who understood how this worked to help us get a product into production. What do you get up to?
30-second version. I'm a professional 3D artist working mainly in video games. I've worked in studios for about 15 years, but for the last 5 or 6 years, I've worked as a freelancer. I also have a daytime job as a DT technician in a high school here in Cardiff. I've been a role player and a war gamer since about 1984, but I'm much more of a role player than a war gamer. I run D&D clubs at the school, but I also run a Warhammer club after school as well with a colleague.
Well, okay. So now then, so 3D printing, so it's right up your street, technically. Can you tell us, in a nutshell, how does this work?
Well, in a nutshell, 3D printing, a 3D printer is a machine that can read a 3D image and lay out layers of plastic or resin, building them up gradually to recreate the image in real space.
And you can get different sizes of printer, can you? Different makes and things that do this?
They do come in different sizes. There are 2 different types as well. The most popular is an FDM printer, which stands for Fused Deposition Modeling. Any 3D object that you want to print is first run through a piece of software called a slicer. And what that essentially does, reads the 3D model and then literally takes sliced samples of it all the way through, horizontal slices all the way through. So if you can imagine that, it's a bit like you've seen a brain scan where you can actually, it's almost like moving through the brains, looking at the various layers as it goes up.
Yeah.
It does the same thing with a 3D model.
Yeah.
So if you can imagine, each layer then is essentially a silhouette of that model at that height, at that particular layer. Once it has that information, an FDM printer, the Fused Deposition Modeling printer, works a bit like a glue gun in that you have a print bed and you have a nozzle. Into that nozzle is fed a low melt plastic cable. And it's heated up at the nozzle to a kind of a gel-like or a liquid form, and it can then use that liquid to literally draw that layer onto the print bed. Once it's done, the print bed drops down a fraction of a millimeter, and the nozzle then draws the next layer, and then so on and so forth, slowly building the model up from the base upwards. More recently, we've had a new generation of resin printers, the SLA or mass stereolithography printers, and these work in a very different way. They use a liquid resin that reacts to ultraviolet light and hardens in ultraviolet light. And the way this one works is you have a vat with a transparent base, under which is an LCD screen, a lot like a tablet or a smartphone.
Yeah.
But it's capable of projecting ultraviolet light. Into the vat, you pour the liquid resin, and then the print bed is lowered into the vat, submerged in the liquid until it's less than the thickness of a piece of paper from the actual transparent base of the vat. And then the image of the layer in question appears on the LCD screen in UV light, which hardens the very thin layer of resin between the print bed and the base of the vat. So it usually takes about 8 to 10 seconds. And then the print bed will raise up a fraction of a millimeter, and then the LCD screen will project the next layer. Yeah, so on and so forth. So that's built up that way, and this thing then it's almost as if it pulls the model out of the liquid in very slow motion.
My God, that's spooky.
It's when you see it speed up, because it works very, very slowly. It can take several hours to print something, but if you see it speeded up on film, it does look really peculiar. There's just this thing dripping with liquid being pulled out of the vat.
Okay. And so these are the latest state-of-the-art versions, are they? These ones are printing resin. So is that why when we look at 3D printing, the great block that always comes up that certainly wargamers that I know say about is, oh, look at the lines on that. Look at the terrible lines you get. It's not smooth, etc. What I've noticed on the ones that we've done, so it's worth declaring that we've got 4 different models, which I think have been done on 4 different printers. 2 of them I think are resin or from this new material, and 2 of them I think are from the FDM printers. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And the FDM ones are the ones that you get the lines on. Is that basically it?
They've progressed a lot. You can get FDM printers that are very high quality, will print very fine lines, and so.
And you can set the resolution, can you? These things print at.
You can, yes. The model that I sent you was done on a cheap one at 0.2 millimeter layer thickness. Now it sounds quite fine, but you can see from the model it really isn't. Probably
the coarser in terms of the text.
Most
probably the more lined of the others. The resin ones appear to be a lot smoother as a model, but there must be then there's a cost aspect, isn't there? I'm guessing that the FDMs are slightly cheaper than the other ones. Is that right?
Yeah. The FDM will work out cheaper. It's I think it's about £20 for a kilogram of the cable. Cable filament. You probably get it cheaper. I imagine it varies in quality, but you're looking at more like £30 for about 500 milliliters of the liquid resin for the resin printer. So
right, and lots of other stuff with the resin printer though. I'm hearing you've got to wear gloves and you can't dispose of it. You can't pour it down the sink or whatever. It's kind of a chemical process.
The resin printers are quite messy.
And how recently have we been able to do this kind of stuff? I mean, it's. Well, in the last 2 years, has this really been possible to produce things like we're seeing now?
3D printers go back a couple of decades. I remember I worked at a model makers about 25 years ago, and they were just starting to get into 3D printing now. I think it was a very rare, very expensive process back then, but quality of the desktop printers has increased considerably in the last few years.
Yeah. And in the future, people keep telling me we're going to be able to print ready painted armies that are going to come whirring off of these machines overnight. Is that wacky, or is that going to happen?
No, I think that's entirely possible. They can print in color already. I've seen 3D models that have been printed in different colors. It doesn't look great at the moment, but I can't see any reason why at some point in the future, probably quite near future, you'd be able to actually print in full color. As you say, press a button, instant army. Instant.
It
takes a few hours.
But if I wanted to get started with it, and what would I do? I buy a machine, and is that it ready to go?
A decent desktop printer is going to cost you about 300 quid, around about that much. Okay.
Yeah.
But you stick that on your desk, plug it to your computer, and if you can get the 3D model that you want to print, then you're ready to go.
Yeah. And this is part of the challenge of this, because one of the reasons I got so animated about it was I wanted an armoured car. Mm-hmm. And it seemed to me that 3D printing seemed to be a very complicated way for me to get this product. If I wanted a tin of beans, for instance, I'd just go to the supermarket and buy a tin of beans.
Yeah. And
it seemed to me if I wanted a tin of beans in the 3D printer world, what I'd have to do is first of all find a tin and then go somewhere and find the beans and somehow put the two together, because I can't get the product as it stands. I had to have a file from somewhere, and then find somebody who's got a printer that can print that file. So there's two sort of industries working together. There's people that are producing the software. Is this right?
The models themselves, as you say, they're available from a number of different places. You've got websites like Thingiverse, or I was introduced to Wargaming 3D. I'd not heard of those before. Again, Shapeways as well, and they have a storefront where you can buy the models, and people will actually make these models and upload them to sell. It's a kind of 3D printing Etsy, if you like. They do have a great variety of models available. When you mentioned that you needed the Humber, that was the first thing that sprang to my mind. Was if you look on Shapeways or Thingiverse, you'd probably find it, but as it turned out, you couldn't. If you buy one from Shapeways, you have to have it printed by them. If you buy it, they print, you pay for them to print it, and then they send it to you. But places like Thingiverse, you can just download the actual file and print it yourself. Failing that, if you have a model, you can upload it somewhere like Shapeways, and they actually have an app on the website that will allow you to test it, make sure it's printable, and then give you a quote. It doesn't have to be one of the models that they're selling. I think Shapeway is one of the most expensive ways to do it, though. It can be quite expensive.
So what's the cheapest way to do it?
If you're looking at doing a lot of models, I would say get a half decent FDM desktop printer. Do it yourself. In the long run, that'll be cheaper. If you just want one model, I think going to a printing service would probably work out cheaper.
Yeah, okay. So let me give a bit of the story about the Humber then. The story behind the Humber is that I like my armoured cars for chain of command in 28mm. I like my stuff to be 148 because I just like the feel of the vehicles being a bit chunkier than some of the figures are. And these days, with figures taking on more and more heroic proportions, I just think sometimes that looks more realistic next to the figure. And there's a great many figure ranges available for 28mm World War II. A lot of the armoured fighting vehicles are in 156. So I like 148, and the search was on for me to find a Humber. I'm a massive fan of this Humber Scout car, which if you know the film A Bridge Too Far, is the one that Michael Caine rides about in the film. And it's not really a frontline fighting vehicle, but it's for me, it's sort of what's the word? It's a kind of classic British World War II armoured fighting vehicle, and I was
iconic.
Get one. Iconic, that's the word. It is an iconic fighting vehicle, and if I could, I'd drive one to work every day. So, can you print one in that size? If you can print one that fits me in, you'll be doing bloody well, I can tell you. So anyway, so this is the story behind it. So I put a call out for people to help me. Can we get a 148th Humber? And it seemed to be a very difficult ask. Some, the file didn't exist or couldn't get one printed out, etc. And then you came to the rescue. And what did you do, Wayne?
It was because you wanted to 3D print it, and because you couldn't find one. I thought, well, firstly, I can model it fairly easily. And I would love to see something that I modelled 3D printed, particularly if it was going to be used. The way I work is I use a piece of software, 3D modelling software called Maya. It's Maya LT. It's a super light version of a professional piece of software that I've used for years in video game development. That's my go-to modeling software. And I first of all found a load of images of the Humber online, particularly plans. It's always good to have front view, side view, top view, this kind of thing. And I can position them then in the 3D space, and I can make the model to those plans. So I know everything's proportions are all right, everything's accurate, everything's spot on. I also grab a load of reference photos just to make sure, if there are nooks and crannies I can't see on the plans, I can kind of get a better idea of the actual physical shape of the object. That was a good example of that. Is the suspension on the front wheels that needed. I had to sort of look at photographs to try and figure that out. And I've got the overall kind of suggestion of the shapes in there, but I had to hugely simplify it so that the 3D printer wasn't printing all these very fine steel bars and cables and what have you. So it's quite chunky. It'll stand up to being pushed around the table as well. So
yeah, good. It will need to be, because my, as you know, my colleague Richard is heavy-handed. So this, the fact that particularly some of these are printed out in one piece means that they're, absolutely brilliant for wargaming, because we like models, but more to the point, we like things that we can get on the table quickly and which are robust.
There are a couple of things that you need to be sure of with making a 3D model. If you're going to actually print it, though, it needs to be what they call watertight. There can't be any gaps that lead to the inside of the model, because the printer doesn't know what to do with it. The walls of a 3D model have absolutely zero thickness. It's literally just a triangle drawn on. They're made up of triangles drawn on the screen. And so if you have an opening that leads to the inside, what you have then is an empty shell with zero thickness, and the slicing software doesn't know what to do with it. Having said that, older slicing software I used would have a hissy fit if you try and put a model like that in. But the software for the resin printer I've been using is actually a little bit more robust. It can figure it out. You have to keep things simple and chunky depending on the size you're printing it. You can't have, notice the Humber doesn't have any of its wing mirrors because they were on very fine metal strands that would have been far too small and fragile to print. So I left those out. I don't think you really notice. You can always mod those on yourself afterwards. So.
Yeah. Now, what it does have on the top is a pintle mounted. It's a Vickers K gun that's on the top there.
Yeah.
Which some gamers will keep and some gamers will chop off. But because that's such a small and thin piece with the barrel, etc. That's some trouble. Is that right? That's a bit of a problem.
That's a really good example, actually, of I underestimated the size of it. Now I noticed that that one there, that printed out really well, and again that's a testament to the fine detailing of the resin printer. The one that I did was a complete failure. There was a lack of support under the barrel. It gave it a valiant try, to be fair, but because of the lack of support, it looked more like a whisk than a Vickers, unfortunately. So,
But again, I think from a wargamer's perspective, that doesn't bother me, because what I'm probably going to do is put loads of kit and stowage and other stuff on the outside of this just to personalise the vehicle. And if the machine gun, if I need to take a machine gun out of my bits box to do that, what we really want is the basic shell of the basic vehicle, and the rest of it we can work around. The details are important to modelers, but for wargamers, we're not that fussed about some of that detail. So on some of them, I noticed the resin guys, they did them with the wheels on, and I noticed that the guys that did the other ones, well, in fact, even one of the other resin ones has got no wheels on. So you've got an option whether you can print wheels on or wheels off. How does that?
I laid them out. I laid them out separately because I wanted to. It made sense to have the wheels lying flat horizontally, just because I was thinking of FDM printers, and I think they would make a better job of drawing the wheels if they were lying flat than if they were actually vertical and attached to the wheel to the actual Humber. Plus, it simplifies the shape. I modelled in recesses behind the wheels so that they could actually be push fit onto the axles. Unfortunately, that on my printing that actually failed. I'm not sure why. I think it got filled full of support material, but I think the others worked. But I know, who did the pink one? Is it Paul?
Paul, yeah, Paul.
Yeah. He actually took my 3D mesh and edited it and put the wheels onto the vehicle before he printed it, because he felt that would work better for him. So that's it's fair enough.
What else do we need to know then? In a minute, what we're going to do is I'm going to show these to Richard and Sid, and for them to pass judgment on the product. Is there anything else that we need to know about this 3D printing process that wargamers should be aware of?
I think you can actually judge the end results just from the point of view of being a wargamer who's looking for a product to use on their table. I mean, how smooth the surface is, how crisp are the details, does the scale look right? Does it look like it would survive usage or storage? It's I think you judge it like you would any other mod you've bought to use in a game, really.
Okay, look, I know that there's very important work that needs to be done in the laboratory, which I think we should probably leave you to get back to.
Sure.
But two questions. Firstly, what will happen to that Humber?
Well, I wasn't going to do anything with it. If you want to host it on the Lardies website for free download, then you go right ahead.
We can try and do something like that. I'm sure if people are interested in a Humber Scout car. And so how do people keep in touch with you, Wayne? So we came in contact through Twitter. What are you on Twitter?
At Wayne_Peters.
Okay.
And my professional folio is crowstuff.co.uk, crowstuff one word.co.uk, and links to pretty much all my other online presences are there. So
look, you better get back to work now. Get back to the laboratory. Keep hard at it. Try and make some very clever stuff for us to be using on our next secret mission. So what I'm going to do is hand back to Sydney in the studio, and we can get underway with our taste test. Sid, over to you.
Well, there's lovely. Fantastic. Well, Nick, I saw when you arrived here this afternoon, you were carrying a box which looked to me suspiciously like a cake box. However, there were not confectionery or cakes in there, to all of our disappointment, but you do have some examples of exactly what Rain was talking about in the piece we've just heard.
Yeah, we've got an absolute treat for you, Sydney.
Even better than cakes.
This is going to be like wine tasting on the
Better
radio.
than sausages.
This is going to be like wine tasting on the radio. Okay? I have got.
Do we spit it in a bucket at the end?
Well, you
don't
might
like
wish to.
taste.
I have got not one, not two, not three, but 4 3D printed Humber Scout cars in 1/48th scale.
Which is your preferred
Which
scale.
is my
isn't
first
it?
goal, which is all the big issue is about I couldn't get up one of these scout cars in 1/48th. And now, thanks to the wonder of this new technology and the help of people like Wayne, I've now got 4 of them.
Well, flop them
So
out.
here we go. I'm going to show you the first one, and I want you to have a look at this one.
Don't tell us who did which, and we can go, oh, I can give that 4 out of 10 or
Okay,
whatever.
I'll put it on the table for you,
Yeah,
and you
yeah,
can
yeah.
just talk through
Oh.
what you see and what you find.
Right, this one's
is
white.
Humber number 1.
Hold on a minute, I'm going to get my painting glasses so I can actually see the detail.
Well, this is. I'm going to call this one Humber number 1.
Humber number 1.
Would you like me to tell you about it in terms of
No.
the way it's printed out?
No, I'll tell
Or do
you
wanna
what
have a
I
look
can
at it
see.
first?
Right,
So this is great on the radio, isn't it?
Yeah.
well,
Richard is inspecting it closely.
I
We
am.
have 4 wheels and a Humber
Lovely detail.
scout car.
Yeah.
Lovely detail.
So printed actually, as you say, Sid, printed
on the-
actually wheels and body separate,
Yeah.
which is worth noting.
Okay. It's pure white, virginal white. We talked about 3D printing before in terms of what I've always said is that it works best on flat surfaces, and this is mainly flat surfaces, isn't it, and straight edges.
It's a fairly angular scout
Yeah,
car.
that's right.
Yeah.
Which seems to have really fitted the bill because there are very few of those funny lines that you often get with prints. So yeah, it's a very crisp kit.
All these lines are clean, aren't they? It's very fine on the areas of the side of the vehicle. Aren't
Well,
they?
I can
Very
tell you
fine
that this car was printed on a Prusa i3 Mark III. So it's an FDM printer of the type that Wayne was telling us about.
Right.
So it's a self-leveling print bed
Yeah.
with a filament detector. Which means that when the filament runs out, it just waits for you to load another reel.
Right,
So
right.
it means that if you run out of filament halfway through printing it, you just load another filament and it starts
It
again,
carries
which gives
on.
it
Right.
an advantage.
Do you know how long that would take to print?
I think it's taken about 6 hours to print. It's made from PLA. Now, I don't actually know what PLA is, but it's made from it.
People's Liberation Army.
Could be
mate.
made from them, all squished up. And I asked the person who printed this, and I will tell you who they're supplied by later, so it doesn't doesn't sway your opinion.
No.
I asked him how much he said he thought this cost to print.
Yeah.
And what would you guess?
Well, if I was buying that model, I think I'd probably be spending. And bear in mind, it's not as big as a Sherman, so it's not huge. I mean, I'm guessing
It's about 8 centimetres long.
It's about 3 inches long by about 1.5 inches tall, and then when you put the wheels on it, obviously that will enhance that. 12 quid.
I would say 12 to 15.
So he says the material cost of printing it is 65p.
So fair. But then there's the cost
Really?
But then you've got the cost of the printer on
Printer,
so
the-
that's a
yeah.
couple.
What
that's
do you
a few-
mean?
That's a few
The
hundred
running
quid.
cost or
This
the
is-
purchase?
This is the cost of printing. Once you've got it, this is the marginal cost, I guess, of printing that piece. So it's the cost in terms of material used.
But you've also got the time for the design as well, haven't you?
Yeah, and that's not in there. Okay, so that's just actually I'm just.
So
this
if you
is-
pay £12
if you've
as a-
invested in the printer and
Yeah.
you've got the printer and you said, you know what, I'm going to download the file and print that off. Then in terms of your the additional money you need to find to do that, he says is about 65p.
Okay.
Okay. So the main issue he says when you're printing them using these is orientating the print to ensure the print sticks to the bed, and you don't need to support it too much. So that's
It's a nice piece.
yeah. So
I
okay,
think
so that's
we'd all
number
be
one.
happy with that on our table.
Right, I'm going to show you Humber number 2.
Humber number 2.
Humber number 2.
Humber number.
2. I've got 2 versions of Humber number 2. Humber number 2 is made
This involved the banana splits.
Humber
is
number
made
2. It's like the Flintstones for wargaming. Humber number 2.
Humber number 2
We're going to play Rocky Races at the end.
is made from a different material, and you're going to love this one, Sydney.
Oh, look at this. This is
no.
my
Yes,
colour.
so this is
Pretty
different material
in
completely.
pink.
I've got, and we've got 2 versions of this
Oh.
now, so I can show you kind of what it's like
hell.
in press. So what I'm showing you now is a There you go, that's Humber number 2. And there's a version of Humber number 2, which was also supplied by the person who printed it, who sent through one of the prints that failed halfway through.
Right.
But he's included it so that we can see what it looks like when it comes off the printer.
That is... that's remarkable. Let's talk about the models, right? Obviously, now I presume these were made from the same design.
These are made from the same design. The difference is on the
Yeah.
one you're holding there, Richard.
Yeah.
The obvious design is the difference is that one's got wheels on it.
On it.
So he's changed the file to print it with wheels on. So
Right.
it comes exactly as it is.
Bloody hell! So you don't even have to stick anything together, and it's got a Vickers K on top.
It's got a Vic on top, which
And
the white one would have had, but it couldn't print to that definition.
Right. And it's incredible the degree of detail on that Vickers K. Well, my first impression, and as I say, I've got my painting specs on, so these are really super magnification, which I use for detailing. It's cleaner in print than the white one in terms of you don't have any. There's almost no graininess to it. It's completely smooth and flat. Although when you hold it at certain angles, you can just see that it has been printed in lines, but it hasn't really left a mark of that. It's just, you can just see it.
Feels almost moulded.
It feels almost like a sort of sweet, a jelly sweet.
Yeah.
The texture is very smooth.
Would you like to tell the listeners what colour it is?
It's bright pink. I mean, it's dildo pink.
That's
is the only way of putting it.
The person who printed it described it to me as marital aid pink.
Oh, right.
And I did question why he had such a large supply. And when I tell you who it is, you'll wonder the same thing too.
Okay, right.
So anyway, he says he doesn't really like this resin and bought huge quantities of it so that he could.
What a shame! Do you know where it's failed? On the last set of wheels.
Yeah. So which means actually with a bit of green stuff, you can make that into a perfectly.
You really
Humber.
could.
But you can see there, and we'll put some photos of these on Twitter so you can see how it prints out with the various bits of support that are on there.
That's really interesting. So when it's printed, it starts like that.
Yes.
And is this sort of jelly material
in
a bucket down here and gets sucked up?
Yeah, that's right. So it's a resin printer. It's a liquid, and it feels to me like lots of reconstituted squash balls. It's kind of got a flexibility about it
and a stickiness.
It's worth mentioning the wheels.
I didn't like to think of that being that colour pink. The degree of stickiness worried me.
It's worth mentioning the wheels, which are cast on, are very firmly cast on.
Yeah, you could.
They're not wobbly in any
You could
way.
hit it with a hammer, couldn't you?
Yeah. Whereas sometimes when you glue wheels,
I've got a hammer. Do you want me?
Sometimes.
So I don't think we'll test it quite that much. I would like to be able to use it, but it also comes with. It's got the Vickers K gun on the top, and as you say, that's fairly robust. I think the barrel would snap if you dropped it on the floor. I'm not going to try it.
It's more robust than
gluing it on
a plastic kit.
More robust than plastic.
It's
I think so.
The joint where it joins the pintle is very solid. The only thing that might ever break would be the barrel. And if you look at it, the barrel's got give. So a bit like we were talking about Annie's resin earlier, that will save it from a lot of trouble. That's a lovely model.
Yeah. So anyway,
it's
that's
a shocking colour, but it is a lovely model.
It's printed on Anycubic Photon S key.
Oh, shut up.
Using pink Anycubic EC UV resin. Took 6 hours and 25 minutes to print. He says it could have printed quicker, but printing on these machines is determined by the height of the object. And this is printed at 45 degrees from horizontal.
You can see that there.
With support material.
So about the same time as the white one.
To fit it on the bed, I think, because obviously the bed is only a certain size, so you have to orientate the shape within that. Now, guess the price of this one then. This is resin, so...
Well,
65p
if we're saying that one is 65p, I'd say that's probably twice as much, because it's, I think, twice as nice.
£1.50.
£1.50 is exactly what you've got the hang of this now. So
what a points, mate.
What a points, mate. So there was, so he had to do some extra work to put the wheels on using a 3D,
another 6 hours extra work when
using
it failed,
a 3D modelling app. That's right, yes, and another 6 hours of work. But of course, you can put that on and go to bed and leave it whirring away downstairs.
A bit like other big pink things.
Yeah. That he's probably printing off the rest of the week. Okay, so that's the second one. Now let's take you on to the third one then. third one is, here we go, this is another, oh no it's not, I'm going to give you this one. This is another resin print, but you'll see this one it doesn't have wheels on it. This
Much
one's
lighter.
with wheels.
Oh, much lighter. And
Grey resin.
and let me make some
Slightly
comparisons.
grittier resin, this one, isn't it?
The edges are more
grey one.
rounded. The detail isn't as crisp on this one. So if you look here, where you've got on there, that detail is crisp, and that edge is crisp. That ain't. This looks more like. Looks more like a jelly baby, one of the black jelly babies, where where they go white when they've got sugar on. That's been sucked a bit, and the details gone off the edges.
I do know what you mean. It's got more of that kind of. It looks like it's out of a mould actually, again, but slightly older mould.
Yeah.
The casting isn't, or the production isn't as fine as the pink ones, and it does look like the resin's kind of the older style resin, isn't it? So it's very grainy. It's not as smooth as the pink one.
Yeah.
And actually, the printing isn't quite as fine, is it?
I would say the printing on that puts it 3rd out of 3 so far.
I think that's good.
But I tell you something.
But with a
If you
undercoat on
hadn't
that-
said that, and if you'd undercoated it and
Yeah.
painted it,
Yeah.
you wouldn't tell the bloody difference.
Well, to be honest, that looks a little bit more worn, which is
It does.
that's
Actually,
appropriate for a campaign.
I'm just thinking that. I really am just thinking that.
So that's the grey one we're talking.
And these wheels, just you poke them on with your finger and got to
Yeah.
catch them all.
So Wayne designed the model so that the wheels exactly that could be fitted on like a model. So this was printed on an Elegoo Mars printer, which cost about 250 quid,
And a K
used
gun.
masked stereolithography MSLA printer. So it is one of the resin ones,
And a K gun.
and the K gun as well is on there. But again, it's probably a bit more brittle than the pink.
It is. But look,
So, yeah.
that's a nice model. If
Yeah.
you ignore the other two and put that there,
If you hadn't seen the other two, you'd be happy with that one.
You would
be.
be very happy, absolutely.
you'd be
happy.
very happy indeed.
So this one only takes 4 hours to print, plus 45 minutes of tidying up. I think that.
Okay.
Is that sucking the edges off it?
I think a little. Yes, I think exactly that. It's printed at 0.05 millimeter resolution. Now he says the printer will do 0.025 millimeters.
Hold on a
If
minute.
you've ever heard of those, Richard.
0.05.
0.05 millimeters, half a millimeter. No, 0.05 millimeter.
A 20th of a mil.
A 20th of a millimeter.
20th.
Right.
It would do 0.025 millimeters, but without much benefit, he says, at 1/48th scale.
There's no graininess. There's no graininess.
And that's, he says again, that one cost, what do you reckon the cost of that one then? Well, I'll tell you, it's £1.50, he says, based on a litre of photo resin, which costs about £35. Now, there are some health and safety issues around photo resin, as Wayne said in his, he said, you can't pour it down the sink, for instance, to get rid of it, or give it to the mother-in-law. Both of those would have bad outcomes. So, depending on your outlook. Yeah. Okay, so that's the third one. Let's crack on. Show you the fourth one.
I like that.
This is the fourth one, and kind of a return to similar territory to what we saw with number one.
Okay,
What
so
you're looking
this
at,
is again with the wheels moulded on, and again the wheels
Right.
are quite firmly.
I think
moulded
actually
on.
those wheels might have been put on
they've been
by,
glued on.
by the person who sent it through.
And it's quite rough on the
Yeah,
underside.
they have, haven't they?
And you can see the lines as it's built up on the side of the vehicle, and actually it's quite significant lining on the front part of the vehicle.
Do you know what that looks to me? I'm just trying to explain this because it's it looks to me like it's been carved out of chalk.
Yeah,
A big piece of chalk. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
There's a sort of grittiness. It's, that.
Slightly
looks-
thicker lines than the first.
Yeah.
the lines are noticeable on that, but on the other three they're not. So these are when the metal plate, the flat metal plates.
Yeah. Look,
you can
this-
see the lining pattern
Yeah.
on the metal plates on the
I
vehicle.
would not be confident that those lines could ever be hidden.
Yeah, you'd have to have very heavy prime, probably.
I mean,
To
I
get
think
rid
I
of
think this is more than a very heavy prime.
Yeah. I think if it was Zimmerit, it might look all right.
If it was Zimmerit, it would look perfect.
Yeah,
But on a smooth
But this
steel.
is this here.
you'd be tempted to try and
Very,
sand that,
very.
and I'm not sure.
I'm not sure
that
how well it would
sand.
do.
I
Do you want me to try?
No. Well, no. Certainly not while we're here to breathe in the particles.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Anyway, this was printed on a Kaleido Compact FDM printer, as Wayne was telling us about in his piece. The person who printed this said, well, actually, this machine has no particular advantage. It's a bit old and crap. So he said...
That's real honesty.
He said it's
Borne
printed...
out by the product.
It's printed in PLA again at 0.2mm resolution.
Right.
He says, which sounds quite fine, but it isn't. If you remember the last one,
That's
printed at 0.05.
so that's 10 times thicker.
And
than
that does show.
Yeah, it
because
really
you can
does
see
show.
on the slope.
Yeah.
Well,
so
for
says
me-
he overdid it on the
latest.
support material. It took 3 hours to print, which is faster than the others.
Yeah.
Again. So it's
but
a
you
bit
can
of a
see-
budget version.
Yeah, the layers are going on quicker. I have to say,
So those are the four.
of the three, it's the big pink fun machine that buzzes all my
I
bits.
think the Pink Panther wins it.
Do you think the Pink Panther wins it?
By a country mile, mate. By a country mile.
Okay, well,
but the
let's-
other two,
Yeah.
contestant number
Perfectly.
1 and contestant number 3, would look absolutely spot on when painted up. This just, I say, wins it by a country mile. There's about 5%. This is, I would say, about 5% better quality, but that 5% is enough
Yeah.
to make it clearly a nicer model. But these two, at 95%, there's nothing wrong with them. If I hadn't seen the others, I'd be over the moon with those. That one, contestant number 4,
Contestant number 4.
the one from the chalk
On the-
crap machine,
Yeah.
I would probably chuck it in the bin.
You'd
And I
take
think-
contestant number 1 and number 3 out.
I would-
You'd really want
I
to date
would.
with contestant
You
number
really
2.
would want a
And
date, that's
contestant
true.
number 4.
If
you
it
would
were,
avoid.
what's that one they do? You know,
No, which one did they do?
the marry.
Oh, Snog, Marry, Avoid.
Yeah, that's
well, we've got
right,
4,
yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I think both the resin ones, from a wargamer's
I'd
perspective,
snog
look
these,
more
I'd
attractive,
marry
don't they?
that, and I'd avoid that.
Yeah, okay. Well, so let me just say the one that won then is was the one that's printed in the Marital Aid pink.
Yeah.
You don't think is what they call it in the brochure.
No.
It's printed on the Anycubic Photon S key printer using Anycubic EC UV resin. Took 6 hours, 25 minutes, at a guesstimate cost of material only. Don't forget, not the printer, of about £1.50, and adjusted so that it was done with the wheels on. Don't forget. So the guy did a little bit of work up front to make sure the wheels are on. But I think actually, if the wheels had been separate, you know what? I still think it would come out really nicely. And the guy who printed that, Richard, was a friend of Lard, who you will know and recognise. When I tell you his name is Paul Edwards.
Oh, Paul, from up in Staffordshire.
Yep.
Hello, Paul.
With his alternate line in selling pink resin items that you can print on his flatbed printer. So Paul said, so thank you very much, Paul. The other ones then, as we've said about...
really nice.
It's worth saying that all the guys who did this off their own, voluntary basis. They said, yes, send me the file, I'll print it off for you and send it through. So massive thank you to all of them for doing this, for free, basically. They printed this and sent them over.
You better send them 65p.
We better have, yeah. Well, they're very keen to see their items going to be printed out and used properly. So
and
let me just tell you who did the other ones because that's important too. So again, a long-time friend of Holmes, long-time friend of Lard, Andrew Holmes is the guy who printed.
Hi, Andrew. Used to be game over in Enfield. Now lives down in the West Country since he retired.
So he's produced that one, which is on the Prusa i3 Mark III. That's the other white one.
That was contestant number 1.
Yeah.
Really nice model. Like that one a lot. Lovely crisp detail.
And
Loads
the other
of
one,
it.
the grey one, the grey resin one, which is printed on Elegoo Mars in MSLA, was printed by Greg Hanna.
Right.
Now, Greg is the man behind the Wargamers Forum.
Right.
www.thewargamersforum.com.
Right.
And he chipped in and sent us through that one.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think that's a really nice model.
That is a
Certainly
really nice
campaign
model.
look.
That is a really nice model, and there's none of those sort of lasery lines. It's it does look more worn and lived in than model number 1, but I wouldn't say one was better than the other, just a slightly different look.
To be honest, I think sitting from here, which is about 6 feet from the table, I think both of them would look really good on the War Games table.
Well, from my point, under the table, they look just as good as each other.
and the last one was printed by Wayne himself.
Right.
On the machine he has access to. So those
Yeah.
were the 4. So the winner is Paul Edwards with his with his marital aid pink Humber, and I'm tempted actually to paint it as marital pink for the tabletop.
Interesting point here. This has got a lid on it. These
Yes.
other three are open.
Yes. I think that's because that's stuck on, or could be separately.
Oh, right.
I think it's glued on,
That's
isn't it?
that's the hatch.
Right,
the,
yeah, I know it's the
Commander's
hatch. Yeah, it looks like it's been stuck on.
Yeah. So what we need now are 4 1/48 scale Michael Caines to put in the top. But yeah, so that's okay. Well, that's it then. That's those run through, and I think I agree with you. That's the nicest one by far enough.
When you've been bleating on about 3D models, and I've been thinking, God, how tedious. But actually seeing them in the flesh, it's really interesting to see how the different ones work. And I'm sitting here thinking, ooh, that quality of those three. Because all the ones that I've seen and felt really negative about have been on the internet, where you look at those models with those terrible grainy lines on that certain companies are selling, and you're thinking, who the hell is buying that?
Yeah.
But looking at these, the level of detail on these.
Well, the ones that I've got more recently from Paint and Glue,
Yeah.
some Staghounds in 1/48 and some white Scout cars as well. You know, the quality of those is in keeping with the higher quality resin.
Yeah.
So my sense is now for 3D in terms of production of raw models, there's some really nice stuff out there. And of course, most of the guys who are printing this, you can flex on the scale of these, so you can go from 156 to 140. You can make it a bit bigger, a bit smaller to suit what you need it to do.
That's interesting. I think what would be really fascinating is these are obviously numbers and it's all angular. I'd be really interested to see if this pink resin also was just as nice on a figure, which is more of a sort of like a flowing, curved figure which is wearing clothing.
Well, what we should do is get Wayne to produce a file for Sydney. So we can print Sydney out in 1/12 scale. It'd be the size of an Action Man.
If you do it 1-to-1, I can perhaps take it to work, and hopefully nobody will ask any questions that day.
We can sell.
Your 12-inch Sydney.
We can sell a 12-inch Sydney. That's what I'm thinking exactly. The market for that would be boundless.
In marital aid pink.
Well, thanks a lot, chaps. I think I'll probably leave it there. I don't think there's much more we can say about that.
I think there's very little we should say on it, that's for sure. But interesting though. I mean, I'm looking at that pink one, and I'm thinking if you're doing 28mm figures in that pink one, I think you get a degree of detail that would be perfectly acceptable for 28mm figures, and look as good as metal. And looking at that degree of sort of wiggle room in there, where it would take paint better probably, and you wouldn't have the bendy sword thing that we were talking about on the last Oddcast. I'm really impressed with that. So
that's a really exciting look into the future as to what we might be talking about in 10 years' time.
Talking about the future, what technology would we like to see going forward? Now I'm thinking, wouldn't it be great? I wouldn't buy that printer to print that tank, but if I went to Wargames Foundry or the Perrys or any of the figure manufacturers out there, and they said to me, look Clarky, we're not going to send you a packet of figures, we're going to send you a memory stick that you plug into your 3D printer, and that gives you a license to print 100 figures, and at the end of those 100 figures the memory stick self-destructs or whatever it is, the piece of technology. In that case, I wouldn't be buying figures. I'd be downloading that code to punch into my printer and printing them here.
And what if the resin you were using was some kind of 3 or 4 colour ink like you had in a printer, printed them out in the colours that you wanted them to be?
Yeah, I mean we've got a publishing business, so I've got a big Hewlett Packard LaserJet with the 4 colours, 3 colours and black, and I can print images that are, they're not block painted images. You could reprint the Mona Lisa on an A4 sheet and it would look like the Mona Lisa.
Yeah.
How far away then are we from when you can put those 3 colour and 1 black filament in and it reproduces it to the same degree.
Well, they're already. Wayne says it's already there.
But he said that the detail's not that great at the moment.
Not
but
yet,
if
not
you
yet.
think that even if the figures could be block coloured, and you could then wash them with an army painter dip or a Vallejo wash, and then just highlight up, how easy would that make things?
Easy and yet terribly, terribly boring.
Good
Because
point.
part of the fun is painting up my figures in the way that I want them to look. And they look different to yours.
With
because
your
we've got
random
different
shades
styles.
of green
Yeah,
that you tell us about.
Marty Feldman Battalion, you know.
And the
marching
googly
across-
eyes.
But
But it's part of the fun of it, isn't it? So certainly for you, I think hugely for you, it's the modelling aspect of the aesthetics of how these units look and how you create that.
I think that's right, but I would imagine that people will probably, if that was available, that technology, people might download a couple of battalions to get them started, and then they would download more figures, potentially which are not painted or coloured,
Yeah.
and then paint those
You
themselves.
raise a good point, Ashley, because looking at these hairy Germans that I'm painting, I wouldn't want them all to have green trousers and a pink top and a red scarf.
Well, that'd be the development afterwards, wouldn't it? Where you
yeah.
then could be able to, change and move the colours as you wanted to.
Yeah,
So,
I the thing I like about painting them is I can make those decisions about, and Confederates, for example, where you want the butternut and the grey and the blue and all the mixes of colour.
Yeah.
It's fine if you're painting a Union Force, light blue trousers, dark blue top, away you go, or Napoleonic British or whatever, but then you couldn't change the facings. Well, I suppose you could, couldn't you? But,
well, this is it. But I think that in terms of our gaming lifespans, you think about what age we are at now. We're all gentlemen over 50. You see the time where actually the printed army in 3D could be there in our gaming lives.
Well, you think back to when we
but
were-
not in the next.
Maybe when we
beyond
were
that.
teenagers, the rules we used and some of the figures that we played with, they're all 15mm Peter Lang figures, which were barely blobs.
I sent off for a sample pack from Peter Lang, and they arrived, and I opened the box up, and I couldn't work out what any of them were, and I couldn't even work out
medievals.
I literally couldn't work out what period they were, and I got a figure, and I wasn't sure if it was a camel-mounted man or a horse-mounted man, because the animal had traits of either, but was not one or the other. It was a kind of Hamafra camel, or whatever it would be called.
But for its time,
No,
yes,
no. And yet people loved them. I knew people who absolutely they said, we really like them because we don't want the detail. We want to just paint the detail on.
Yeah.
Well, there's
They
an
should
element-
be locked up in a psychiatric hospital. They must be bleeding insane.
There's an element of truth about that, but considering those things that we bought in the 80s, maybe 30 years ago, 30 years from now, who knows what?
Citadel figures in the 80s, beautiful, as good as anything you get today.
That's true.
So I think what we'll do, I've got to work out what we're going to do with these now. Of course, they need to be turned into things that can be used on a table.
I know
So I'm
what you
going
do,
to
mate.
so I'm going to paint them up.
Sell them on
Yeah.
eBay
We'll paint them
and
up.
say metal.
I think what we'll do is you'll paint them up.
Price.
I was going to say we'll take them to Crisis, but I'm not going to be able to paint them in time for Crisis because we're recording this
Just paint one.
just about 5 days before.
Paint one, you gimlet. You can paint one up, you
You
lazy
just paint
git.
the Pink Panther.
Yeah.
I'll do what we can.
And then take the other big pink one there just to impress the
We
continentals.
can have this to look at, can't we, as a
Yeah.
side? And if nothing else, it will give the customs officials
It
something
will.
to look at as we go through the border control.
It will,
As we spend the day in holding cells in.
we could take it to that bar we go to.
We could. Yeah, we could put it in the window.
They'd like
It would
it.
fit in there.
It would.
Well, chaps, I think it's been a really interesting chat. And it's been some really good stuff there on the table. Thank you very much for bringing those in, Nick. But I think that's all we've got time for here on the sofa.
No, I've got a question.
Please carry on. Richard.
Can you ever see a situation in which our rules become apps?
Yes.
Right. Tell me more, Nicholas. Tell me
Yes,
more.
I can. Well, I can see where the rules would have much more of an interface of what's going on the table and creating some of the inputs to what goes on the table, much in the way that U-boat game would do. So it would tell you some things. For instance, if you used an app, a random event might not be generated by a dice roll on the table. It might be a random event that's within the app itself.
Well, I've got a
that
question.
could happen or not happen, depending on how the algorithm runs as part of the app. Whether that's right or not, I don't know. But you say about how it would work,
Yeah.
that might be how it could work.
Well, I would question one thing, because in the game that you played, you're basically playing a board game, weren't you? It's a U-boat with set locations. So the app knows precisely what's on the board.
Yeah.
In a war game, which you set up yourself, that app would have to be so much more comprehensive to be able to deliver something which is as good as a human umpire.
So what if it's a pint-sized campaign? Pint-sized campaign knows what you're putting on the table within certain parameters. I don't think it's a million miles away from what.
That's an interesting one. You see, I would say no. I can't see the rules we write being replaced with an app, but I could see a pint-sized campaign where you bought the app, and then that would allow a lot more options in terms of scenarios. Where do you go to? So you type in the result, and it says, well, it's not the next. You can't attack for the next day. You've got to wait.
Yeah.
It's not. You're not going to be ready at 10 o'clock in the morning. It's going to be 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And no, you're not going to that table. You're going to this other table instead. And I can see it doing so many more things, and being able to introduce things like logistics and supply.
And for sure, the app would cover all the things that happen between battles.
Yeah.
In a consistent and thorough way.
And maybe a more thorough way. So you could type in the number of people who have been killed in inverted commas in that scenario, and then it would come back and it would say, well, actually, because you couldn't attack at 10 o'clock until 3 o'clock, because that had to be put back 5 hours, another extra 2 people are available now because they've come out of being done up by the nurse.
And that level of detail could be much deeper as well. So it's not just 2 people. You could have 2 individual people with individual stories behind them that join your unit. Yeah. So you could have a lot more potential depth in it.
Is the time taken to develop something like that?
It wouldn't be a pint-sized campaign, though, would it? It wouldn't be £3.50 or whatever.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. The actual computing power to deliver something which actually you can think about and write down on a piece of paper fairly easily, taking half an hour. You may be spending 3 or 4 months developing as a computer app.
I think there's lots of ideas around that, though, aren't there? And how quickly apps, fail to be supported on the platform that you're running them on. You buy it and it works on this version of the phone, and you go to the next phone version, and for some reason it doesn't work. So there's a whole industry around supporting those kind of applications that is really unknown to us, and we'd have to learn or somehow bring in-house to actually help us to do that. It's not. While the development of an app in itself is not expensive, the development of a workable app that's resilient enough to stay into the future is, and that's really the thing that we have to.
It's a significant different business direction than just the traditional publishing.
But it's still the product of an electronic item that's generated by you working in interface with a computer.
I agree with that.
I wonder if it's more fun ultimately, or whether it would actually be like that computer war game where you put in Unit 17 fighting Unit 242, and then you go, well, that was boring.
That was literally zero fun.
It was literally zero.
That was minus fun.
But potentially what it enables, and this is really where the consumer trend is going, isn't it? Is it enables you to take a game from a box, play it on a table without worrying about all the rest of the stuff that you need to do to make that happen. So it allows you to pick something up and play it by pressing a go button, and that gets people into action more quickly. Maybe.
Well, I think there's a big maybe there, but yeah, interesting point though. Interesting point. Sorry, it's just a question I felt I wanted to ask, Sid. I'm sorry if you wanted to rush off and play with a big pink plastic thing.
Not this evening. Maybe another time. But before we sort of contemplate what I'm doing later this evening, I think we have some other shout-outs for forthcoming Lardy events to put on your calendar. And of course, it is Crisis this coming weekend in early November. The 8th and 9th, I think it is. I think Crisis must be on the 9th.
Yeah, we'll be there running a game, as we said, the Arnhem game with the Recce Jeeps, so you're more than welcome to come along and join us for that.
I got an email from Anton Boot over there in Europe, and he's running a Mere Question of Pluck.
which is one of
Boer
my
War Battles, one of your favourite, my
very,
favourites.
very favourite set of rules.
He's got a choice of 2 battles. He's not settled on which one yet, so it'll be great to catch up with him there. And I hope we get an opportunity to have a chat with him for the next Oddcast, which will be coming live-ish from Antwerp. So yeah, I'm sure there'll be lots of other large stuff there, so we'll be able to go around and have a chat with many, many people.
And we should also say, I think about that next Oddcast, because that will be a crisis special. We're going to be running with the hashtag Ask Sydney, I believe.
Ask Sydney.
So send your questions in on Twitter or by email with the hashtag Ask Sydney, and we'll put them to Sydney whilst we have him in the car on the way to
Captive.
Antwerp, which we know is in Belgium, not in Holland.
That's right. So that's it. Questions on the back of a £10 note to my address.
Be good.
Yeah. And of course, let's not forget we're meeting up with the lads from Lard America there, which will be really good to see them there and show them the joys of Antwerp.
And the beers.
And the beers, which is actually the same thing.
Oh, yes.
And Steel Lard in Sheffield is being run on the 23rd of November.
Yeah.
There are drinks on Friday evening for all of those with galvanised livers.
I'll be there.
And then
galvanising.
Unfortunately, I can't make that because I'm in Hull that day. And then the event on the Saturday with curry and a few sociable few beers afterwards on Saturday.
We're talking of Lard America, actually. Let's not forget they're going to be at Fall In very soon. The HMGS convention there on the 15th to the 17th of November. That's at the Valley Forge Casino Resort at King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. I just wonder if Bob Hope will be singing in the evening or whatever. It sounds like a fabulous venue with
Shady Tree and his acorns.
Yeah, very probably.
And did I see something about a Texas
Texas
Lard event
Hold'em all.
maybe some point?
Yeah,
in the future?
they are talking about a Lardy event down in Texas. All of my exes live in Texas. That's why I hang my hat in Tennessee. But Texas is a place I'd love to be.
Yeah.
So we'll have more details on that from the guys down in Texas when we hear from them.
Everything's bigger in Texas.
Everything's
right?
bigger in Texas.
You'll love
what
it,
would
Sydney.
Daddy say?
You'll love it, Sydney. That's what I'd say. So also worth saying then in terms of what's coming up on the Lard calendar, those
Bristol's.
indefatigable chaps at Big Bristol Independent Gamers will be hosting a Chain of Command 1944 event on the weekend of December the 7th and 8th. Andy Crow and Reg from Walthamstow will be running that. So check out details on Facebook at the Bristol Independent Gaming page. Yeah. And Reg from Walthamstow and Reg from Dagenham are both going to be there.
Yeah. Well, Reg from Walthamstow apparently is going to be signing autographs, so that's one not to miss out on.
And another one not to miss out is CanCon, which is held from the 25th to the 27th of January at Exhibition Park in Canberra, Australian Capital Territory.
Struth, mate!
Struth, Gaza. Steve McGuigan is running a Chain of Command event there, focusing on the fall of France and the Low Countries using the 1940s handbook. And they've got a boot camp for those new to the rules and have the usual range of superb tables built by the magician of terrain, that is John Bond. Now you can contact Steve at steve.mcguigan, that's MCGUIGAN, home@gmail.com, steve.mcguigan.home@gmail.com for what looks like being a terrific
Bonza, mate, it'll be ripper.
My son went to a Halloween party at his university last week. He went as David Warner from the Australian cricket team, and he was wearing sandpaper bandoliers. And all the Australians would say how terrible and hope something awful happened to him. Well, something did, because of course he was wearing sandpaper bandoliers, and he says, Dad, the inside of my arms got all ruffled up on the sandpaper.
All chafed up.
Yeah,
Oh dear.
Yeah. Okay, so Phil
talking
Turner.
of chafing,
You going to tell us about Phil
no,
Turner?
you tell us about
Phil Turner is running a Peninsula War Sharp practice weekend again at Bristol Independent Gamers called On Avant. It's on the 8th and 9th of February. Details are on the Facebook page Sharp Practice Open Events.
And nearly, finally, Lard America are going to have several games at Adepticon in March next year. We'll bring you details of them as they emerge. Of course, March the 7th will see Southampton host another Lardy game today with Come and Have a Go If You Think You're Lard Enough. And Warlard is going to be in Durham on the 25th of April. We've just had that date confirmed this week. More on all of those as we get closer, because we're getting a bit Mystic Meg with our crystal balls.
I also see that the guys in Stockholm, Sweden way, may have found a location for a Lard event at some point next year.
It did look like a murder scene in the photographs I saw, but there was a kind of chalk body on the carpet.
A murder scene in a ritual sacrifice room. But anyway.
But it is Sweden, that's normal. I've seen that television programme.
More Nordic black metal.
Yeah.
So that's all we can squeeze into this show, Oddcast. Please don't forget that the next show will be recorded in, around and en route to Antwerp. So please do send in your questions for a marathon #AskSydney session. Thanks for listening, and thanks to Rich, Nick, and of course Roger Barraclough and the gang, who are going to play us out in their usual style. Thank you, good night, and hope to see you in Antwerp.
Good night.
Good night.
In tonight's show, Sidney Roundwood was joined by Nick Skinner and Richard Clark, with music by Roger Barraclough and his band.